down that next.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
October 19th, 1941, I arrived in the front bedroom of my great-grandfather, John T. Kaufman's pioneer home near Orson, Iowa. You folks may not have heard of Orson, Iowa. There's currently 2 people living in it. My aunt ran the grocery store and was a postmaster, and when she retired, the town almost folded up. I arrived before Dr. Sark did. He was coming from Logan through the hills of Magnolia and up the Soldier River Valley. Because he was late, he only charged half price, $25. And Dad worked that out with him by letting him duck hunt on our wet rented farm. So you see how valuable I am. Grandmother Powell, who had raised 10 children, and an aunt delivered me. All 3 ladies, including my mom, said there was a special feeling in the room. Grandmother said this little boy must have a special work to do. Mom said I was an important addition to the family, for I meant they got an extra sugar ration book as World War II was just starting. My mom's Kaufman family were very early pioneers in Harrison County, having come up from Tennessee through southern Iowa in 1865. Great-grandpa John T. Kaufman built his holdings from 80 acres and a log cabin to 1,600 acres with a nice home and barn before getting his hand caught in a hand-cranked corn shell and dying of lockjaw in 1890 at age 62. His son, my grandfather Elmer, was the first bromare carrier out of Orson by horse and buggy. His daughter Eva would help him, and they often cut fences in the winter to get around just to get the mail through. 3 Powell brothers came from southwest Indiana by covered wagon in the late 1880s. The hills and rivers made them feel at home, similar to where they came from. Grandpa Walter Wilbur Bill Powell lived across the Soldier River Valley from the Kaufmans on a farm they cleared out of river bottom trees. He built a very nice home and barn and built for other neighbors. Sadly, he lost the farm in the Depression. After listening to my father's family talking about the loss of that farm for years, I set a goal of having a farm for myself. My mom and dad's first date was a barn dance Grandpa Kaufman had to celebrate his new ferry house. I fell on the cellar door and broke my right arm at age 2. Enjoyed it so much I did it again at age 4 on a Saturday. That's not a good day to break your arm, because the doctor was in a poker game up over. He had a business in Pisgah, but the telephone crank operator knew where it was, so Dad took me to him. Well, the doctor wasn't very happy about being found. He called out of his poker game. So he said it looks to him just like a sprain, and he taped it up. It didn't get better, so Dad and Mom took me to Council Bluffs to the hospital. They set the arm and put a cast on it. To make me feel better, Dad stopped at the drugstore for ice cream. I'd never seen ladies smoking, and all too loudly said, "Dad, those ladies are smoking." We lived far back in the woods. The arm ended crooked, so Mom called the elders for laying on of hands, and it grew back straight. I was baptized into the RLDS Church and our very little Sioux mission. Elias Riley, our only resident priesthood member, brought in a small horse tank for the purpose. It was a culmination of a week-long missionary series. The night my dad came to hear was the night the man railed against the Catholic Church. My Irish Catholic grandmother Powell had raised her children in that church. Dad had left his church to marry my mother, although he never joined our church. Sunday morning of the baptism, my dad caught me at the bottom of the stairs to ask me if I really wanted to be baptized. And I told him I did. It was confirmation time after the baptism, and us kids were all lined up for it. The missionary man and our pastor, L.D. Weldon, then living in Moorhead running a honey business, took turns confirming us. In the rotation, I would have been confirmed by the missionary man, but LD elbowed him out of the way and confirmed me. He knew my dad would like that much better. Later, LD Weldon came to Graceland and was the coach of Bruce Jenner fame. When Dad died, it didn't seem right to have his funeral in either church, so we rented the high school auditorium in Magnolia. My cousin, Neil Fagan, a Catholic priest, helped another cousin, or I'll guess Elder John Leiter, and myself do the funeral. I used a slide set of photos to explain his life. Martha Harper often reminds me that before funeral homes were using lots of pictures. I was ahead of my time. It seemed to be a healing service for the Missouri Valley Catholic Powells and the Kaufman family members. I have a picture of an old broken down church out in Nebraska. I used to make the point our walls between denominations are man's walls, not God's walls, and we should break them down. A Catholic cousin just last year asked me if there was a recording of that service. Thank goodness there isn't. My mother, Lois Powell, was a tireless worker for the church. I should stop a second and say I have two claims to fame. I'm the son of Lois Powell, and I'm the father of Lorcan Powell. She started a Scarlark oral group for the girls of the town. Asked her mothers to help her and just loved bringing them into the church. The congregation later moved to Mondamon. If you went there now, you would find that 9% of the people are from my mother's efforts. Clifford Cole wrote a book about using children's activities to add to congregation numbers. We always wonder if he got the idea from my mom or if mom got it from him. She admired his ministry when he served with my district. The year I first entered first grade in Mondamon, newly reorganized school, I was only 5 that fall. Each day the kindergarten teacher would come into our classroom and pluck a student out back to her class. I was sure I would soon be plucked also, but it didn't happen. We were a class of 19, 17 boys and 2 girls. People wonder why I've always been socially behind. I'm not supposed to tell you, but one girl was pretty and the other one wasn't. I liked school and we had wonderful teachers. I even took my Book of Mormon cartoon book to a 6th grade teacher to prove that all the people didn't come across the Bering Strait into North America. She never commented about it. I enjoyed playing baseball and would often get hit and get on first base. Then the coach would put in a pinch runner, for I was mighty slow at running. I was a class valedictorian and made plans to go to ISU in ag education. My ag teacher took me to Ames for an Ag 450 field day, where the students ran the farm. He really wasn't worried about my grades, just wanted to show the bashful farm boy around. I was too poor to think of going to Vixen. The first year at ISU cost $1,050. $50 was for a new Swin bicycle after my sister's bike was riding split in 2. That was my car until grad school. I went to school on scholarships and federal loans. I knew that an education was my ticket for advancement and took 18 to 21 hours each quarter and was always on the dean's list. I just loved learning. Had no money, so no girls. I had a wonderful major professor, Mr. Bundy. He was a second father. But one day he really bugged me by telling me he didn't know how I got such good grades when I was only the son of a tenant farmer. Apparently crop share children are not supposed to have good grades. He had me pegged as not being worth much. After a BS degree in the fall of '63 and 2 quarters of working on my master's degree, I became the Missouri Valley vocab instructor. I really enjoyed the adult class and some of the boys. However, that lasted only 1 year because I was given a assistantship to go back to ISU to work on a PhD in ag economics and teach a marketing class. I liked the real world better than university teaching. When the coursework was finished, I applied for and got a job at the new ISU Area Extension Office in Creston as farm management specialist at the same salary as a new college prof. Besides, I need more income for my new bride, Nancy Griffith, and our expanding family, soon to be 2 boys. We met each other at church in Ames in 1962. She thought I was my sister's baby brother, even though I was 2.5 years older than my sister. Guess I was well preserved at that time. However, dating did not become part of the picture for 4 more years. In ISU Extension, I spent 8 years helping farm families in 8 counties around Preston, teaching farm record-keeping, cash flows, land evaluation, estate planning. Even perfected a method for helping farmers to plan their enterprise with linear programming and computer work. Night meetings became tiresome with a young family, so I moved down the street and became the Production Credit Association vice president covering 6 of those counties, loaning money to farmers. In 1981, a new president was hired who fired all 12 of us loan officers so he could have his own crew. I helped my friends get bag jobs, and then I created one for myself called Positive Farming Assistance as business consultant for farm families, self-employed. And I think if you'd like to, we have a copy of our business card that Nancy and I made, and thought you might get a kick out. What you'll find interesting about it is it's not a small card. It's not one to stick in your billfold. It was one to purposely have people put on their bulletin board by their cell phone, so they could call me and not lose the card. If you notice the green color, this is the beginning of the farm crisis. Everything is down in the dumps. Even worse than the wrong guy getting elected last Tuesday. People are very distraught, and Nancy and I knew that farmers needed something positive. So we named the business Positive Farming, and that green color means something. Green for progress. At the bottom of the back side of the card on your bottom are the things that I could do for people. I didn't realize how valuable my previous 2 jobs would be to me to have the skills to help those folks through the crisis. I helped more than 100 families save their farms. But then a curveball came when many couples declared divorce. It really threw me for a curveball. I'd helped all these people save the farms, and all of a sudden the farm is going to be cut in half, and that's not a good deal. The good marriages under stress get better, but weak ones fly apart. And it had a pattern to it. Most of the couples are about age 42. The kids are out of high school. And the wife had gone to town to get a job to help the family, and she was sick and tired of the farming mess, and I didn't blame her too much. And there was many too many divorces. One I remember in particular, the farmer had me in the courtroom as his witness, but his wife had a better lawyer from Des Moines. He was to inherit quite a bit from his father's estate. She wanted her share now and got it. I came home and sat down beside Nancy and said, "Nancy, what do you want?" It was a long day in court. And I decided that all couples about to be married should attend a divorce session. I think it would help our divorce rate to be lowered. Along the way, our farm gradually grew from 1 sow and 2.4 acres, which we named Olive Acres, for it was a cheaper spread. That's what we had when we started in Creston, to 240 acres and 32 sows. The sows are farrowed in Cargill isolates, where the sow is free to come outside to drink, eat, and mess. Barton helped me build them in our garage at our first house before we moved to our 52 acres, even though he was only 5 years old. The land was a bare piece with no building. Bob Hendon helped us get a Wausau home that went up in a week. I used ridge still planting and no-till planting on the crops, and recently added prairie strips to hold down erosion. I should stop on that and explain to you what prairie strips are. My land was all tiled but not terraced, and we got climate change. Instead of having 1 to 2 inch rains, we had 3 to 5 inch rains and too much erosion. The trick to prairie strips, it was researched by Iowa State up on the Neil Smith farm, is that when you get big rains, the tall prairie grasses stand up and don't fall over like grown grass does, and they stop the water. And so I have these strips 30 feet wide on contour around the field, and they just plain stop the erosion. I had a fun experience getting those strips laid out. I was planting my corn and beans in alternating 12-row strips so that makes 30 feet wide. So I just simply took a strip and put the prairie strip on it. When I took the map over to our NRCS office, he was amazed how perfect my strips were on contour. He said, "You must have had an engineer lay these out." And I said, "Well, I was sitting on my 730 John Deere, and I looked across the field and picked out a tree on the contour and drove towards it." He liked the contour of my strips. They wasn't too proud of the method I put. Saving our own farm wasn't easy during the farm crisis years. Our bank gave us 7 years for making payments with nothing borrowed to pay off our debts. I got it done in 6 years. The Federal Land Bank foreclosed on us but held off when I took them $1,000 a week for my tax preparation. Our business kept expanding until we had more than 400 families to help and more than 700 tax returns to do each year. Nancy kept me fed and answered the phone and talked to the clients that came through the door, even when she didn't really know them. It was an interesting and fulfilling ride with lots of wonderful clients. Yet she heard laughter coming from the office, and people left happier and standing straighter, and when they came, she knew I'd done a good job. My dad said the business in 1981 wouldn't work, for farmers didn't have any money to pay us. He was right, but if you could get them tax refunds, then they could pay you. So you might say our family lived on tax refunds for a long time. In 2003 and 4, we built a new easier to access office upstairs for clients, along with some other family rooms. And Nancy designed a wonderful home for us. The special aspect of our business was having almost all the Mennonite farmers in Decatur County as clients. It all started with one phone call from my dad, who asked me what it would cost for me to help his son who was having a credit problem. I told him not much and asked where he lived. He said, "You go 1 mile north of Decatur, roll down your window and you smell him." I said, "Amos, there's no houses 1 mile north of Decatur." "No, but that's where you'll start smelling him." He lived another mile on north. But the problem was Dad was a cattleman and Floyd was raising feeder pigs. Well, it didn't take too much struggle to get Floyd fixed up on his credit. But the sad part was, a few more months, Floyd called me. His dad was losing his farm, and the good news there is Floyd was able to buy it later from FHA. But in the process of making some money for the family, he was driving a rock truck in northeast Iowa, and he had an accident and was killed. And now, the next trauma that set in, Floyd went to get his dad's car in Des Moines. When he opened the trunk, he was shocked. The trunk was full of papers. Papers that said Dad had been playing the commodity market, but they also said if he made any money, he gave it to the Boys and Girls Club in Des Moines. And Floyd said, "Ray, what are we going to do with all these papers?" I gave him a very professional answer. I said, "Shut the lid." It wasn't exactly what a lawyer would tell him, but it worked. The world didn't need to know about all those papers. I love all those Mennonite clients dearly. Well, I didn't say within 2 more years, almost all the Mennonite farmers became my clients. And I have thoroughly enjoyed working with them and knowing their families, and they're dear friends of ours. My favorite hobby was canoe boarding with my sons in the Boundary Water. Plus, photography and traveling. We took our sons to all four corners of the U.S. on vacation. Traveling has been eye and mind openings to Switzerland, Austria, Africa, Ireland, UK, Finland, and Norway, and this summer to Alberta and British Columbia, Canada by bus and Rocky Mountaineer train.
Raymond, they're saying they're having trouble hearing you. I don't know if you can move that any closer.
Yeah.
You almost need to eat it, Ray.
Yeah.
Well,
There, that's
Is that better?
it might be not the best digestion either, but I'll try. There was a sad part about that trip over the Canadian Rockies. We went by bus and van up to Jasper, and we got on the train there, and 2 more days we were in Vancouver. But about a week later, a big forest fire came into Jasper and burned up the west 40% of the town. A terribly sad event. But after beginning in the Little Sioux Mission, I attended Logan congregation in my late senior high school year, and summertime plus the Ames congregation through my college years. Soon after coming to Creston, Sherman Fisk Sr. called me to be a priest and appointed me education director. Nancy and I enjoyed the new curriculum for it applied religion to everyday problems, but the Creston congregation didn't like it at all. The only peaceful thing to do was to leave and go to Mountaineer, where they were more accepted. That's an understatement. They didn't like it, they ran us out of town. But anyway, we enjoyed being in Mountaineer. Their Gertrude Bailey even let me teach her Sunday school class. And her son Jack, as our loving pastor, called me to be an elder. Finest Easter later called me to be what I call a low high priest. I hope someday to get my card changed so it says low high priest. we attended 14 years at Mountaineer until son Noel, who was the only person in his age group left, requested we try returning to Creston in 1986. When he knew several of the Creston young church members, his age were acting. There was a lot of controversial things taking place in the church then. The farm crisis had taken its toll on some member businesses, and the Creston congregation had shrunk considerably. We did our best to bolster the group as much as we could for the next 36 years. We have good memories from both Mountaineer and the last Creston year. 2 memories of the Holy Spirit's help stick out. The year my dad died, which was in 1984, he died in the spring, and that fall I was out combining an old John Deere 95 combine. That combine has a small chain that runs a paddle conveyor to take the chain up, take the corn up to the bin. But that day it kept coming off, came off 3 or 4 times, and I was doubly frustrated because first of all, I knew if I found the chain and got it back on, it would just come off again. And I remember the sky was angry, and it was a bad afternoon, and I couldn't find that chain. But all of a sudden, there seemed to be a presence in the field that told me to go over here and look underneath these shucks, and there lay the chain. On the way back to the combine, the idea came to me how to change the gear so that chain wouldn't go off. It was obvious to me that my dad was helping me from heaven. In the fall of 1995, Nancy came down with GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome, an autoimmune disease that destroys the lining of your nerves, so you're paralyzed. The morning that the doctor was to announce his findings, I was bowled out of the pit at 5 a.m. and told to get to the hospital in Des Moines. The doctor usually made his rounds in the afternoon, but that day he came in the morning. Nancy got worse each day. On Saturday, a new nurse who had experience with GBS. When she gave Nancy a blood clot prevention shot in her stomach, she didn't flinch. The nurse asked me to come out in the hallway. She said the paralysis is getting closer to her diaphragm. I'm going to go get the order to move her to intensive care. I'm going to repeat the plasma exchange treatment today and tomorrow. Nancy part was, she got that permission from the neurologist that hadn't even seen Nancy yet. And I greatly appreciate that nurse being so forceful in getting it done. Sunday was Nancy's worst day. When I went to see her at 5:30 that morning, she was asleep, so I didn't bother her. Coming back down the hall in Methodist Hospital, I saw a door that said chapel. Opening it, I found myself on the second floor of the chapel, looking at a large picture over here, wall-size full picture of the great healer, her master physician. Christ is supposed to be looking up at the man being lowered through the ceiling. But that morning, I maintained that his eye looked at me, and he said, "I will be with you." And Nancy got better every day after that. I realized that I was tired and wore out, and both she and I were shot. But anyway, I considered it a very good day when I saw Jesus' eye. Besides teaching Sunday school, I was asked to be a counselor to 5 different state bishops over a span of almost 20 years. I enjoyed speaking in out-loud congregations to get acquainted with them, there to see how they were doing. My favorite church work was funerals. That may bother you a little bit, but I've done about 50 funerals altogether. Everyone deserves a good funeral. Besides, the person never complains and they stay buried. I'm only batting about 50% on marriages, even though I tried hard to do a lot of counseling. Some reason they don't stay married, but those folks I buried, then we know where they are. I should confess to you that there's a reason we had to close the Creston congregation. I performed 15 funerals out of that congregation. In other words, I buried that congregation. The problem was I was better burying people than bringing new people into the church, right? That's my minor problem. I appreciated being asked to help with clients' funerals. And one daughter asked me if I would do her wedding if I lived long enough. I surprised her and I did. A client this summer told me one of the best things you ever did was to bury Nancy. I agreed. She brought me to Southern Iowa to fulfill my purpose in life. Nancy and Jesus have been my 2 best helpers. We are blessed with 2 nice sons, Larkin and Noel, their wives Kelly and Shauna, and 1 grandson, Tristan. That's the summation of my life so far. At the moment I have Parkinson's disease in my 2 legs and I'm not worth much, but I've had a good life and I have enjoyed doing church work and especially enjoyed helping foreign families. Do you have any questions?
I was curious about the papers in the trunk. You never looked at them to see if he made any money in the commodities market?
People don't make money in the commodity market.
Somebody does.
Well, yes, no. My experience with clients was the worst thing that happens to a person is to make money the first time you try it. Because then, you know, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel, you know. So then they'll put more money in and start losing. But, you know, obviously he made money sometimes and not sometimes. He wasn't a wealthy person. But the good news was it appeared that obviously whatever money he made, he gave it to the Boys and Girls Club. So I knew if he spent all the time adding all this stuff up, he'd come up with 0. And it wasn't a terribly professional answer to say close the trunk, but given the circumstance, I think it was the best answer.
I want to let the congregation know that we've activated a new feature today. We are closed captioning comments of the speaker, and it's working rather effectively. Question number 2. Ray, have you ever heard the audible voice of God?
the only time I'd get close is that morning when Nancy was in the hospital, and I was actually bolted out of bed at 5 a.m. and told to get to Des Moines. It wasn't an audio voice, but it was a strong command that I should get up and get there. And that's as close as I could come to that, I think.
Have you ever been around a group that spoke in tongues?
No. I have enough trouble talking just plain.
Third question. By and large, are you happy with where your community of Christ is today? By and large, with its philosophies and concepts?
Yes, I am. And I think we have changed and improved a great deal. A good example is my dad. I know one reason he didn't come to our church because we wouldn't serve in communion. He was a Catholic, raised as a Catholic. Communion was terribly important to him, Eucharist, and we just plain wouldn't serve him. So he didn't bother to come. And I'm very glad we got that changed so we can share Christ's blessings with all people that are baptized unto him. There's been much progress in the church.
But was there ever an internal struggle with you? Women in the priesthood, did you balk at that as a young man?
No. One reason was because my mother should have been called as a priest.
Absolutely, absolutely.
She was too old. It was boiled down to. So that was very easy for me to accept. There was another reason, and I should tell you another story. In the farm crisis time, when I was trying to help all these people, I got very tired and wore out. I needed a break. And we were to have a men's retreat down in Lake Donovan. And I needed to take some papers to a client in Diagonal. And I told him I'm going to leave at 5:30 in the morning and drive down to Lake Donovan. And I'll stop at your house and give you these papers. He agreed to that. On the way down to Diagonal, I kept passing farmhouses that had their lights on. And this is 5:30 in the morning, and they're not dairy farmers. And I kept seeing all these lights on in these homes. And in the depth of the farm crisis, I knew that they were up worrying about their situation. And thinking about it, I began to cry. And I don't often cry. You don't do 50 funerals and cry all the time. But when I got to Diagonal and the man, when I met him and gave him my papers, he sensed I needed someone to talk to. Instead of just taking the papers, he invited me in, and we had a long discussion about it. The sad part is, a little bit more time, he was killed in Mount Air when the grain elevator collapsed. He and the man unloading his truck were killed. And my point of this story is that and he left a wife and 3 daughters. It was a very nice lady minister in Diagonal that performed his service. I couldn't think of a kinder thing to do that service than a lady helping with a lady and her daughters. So no, it wasn't. I was very happy with the fact that we have women in the priesthood. They bring talents that we men don't have, and can help people in ways that we can't even start to do.
Ray, did your father ever get to take communion in the church?
No.
Oh.
He didn't. But it honestly was a great day of his funeral when all these people were together in that auditorium. My dad wasn't a church goer, but he worked he helped with baseball teams in the summertime, helped the coach. I said in that funeral that Dad raised 2 crops each year, a crop of corn and a crop of boys. And he would take boys to Canada fishing with him. And so he ministered to people in a different way than most people do. And I appreciate my father. My mother was very active, and in fact the priesthood never, but Dad did it in a different way. And that service was a very healing service. There was a lot of tension between the Catholic Powells and thru and the non-Catholic stuff of where we were. And that seemed to erase that. And it's been a very healing experience. And I'm very happy that my Catholic cousins talked to me about this first service and their remembrance of it. But no, my dad never did.
My next question is kind of a downer. You said you were kind of run out of the Creston congregation.
That's right.
What are the mechanics of that? I don't even know.
You surely were around when we got the new curriculum, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, actually, Rich was more over you in 1970.
I was in Lamont.
But how old would you have been?
11, 12?
Okay. You were one of the kids, so he wasn't.
no, what the basics of it though was that Ness and I, in our training in education to be teachers, were taught in effect the problem method and to try to apply to your daily life whatever you're learning about. And we thought the new curriculum was just dandy and great. For some reason the folks in Creston just were totally turned off by it. And one mother said to me, my children can't even name all the apostles. Well, I don't think I can name all the apostles today either, but they had a lot of reasons. But it was just simply change was too much for them.
When you walked in the door, it was like, well, what are you doing here? We don't agree with the way you do things. And I mean, he was the education director, and they didn't like the way he was trying to help the teachers downstairs with their materials and things. It was very uncomfortable, and we had a 5-year-old as a baby, and let's see, 70. I mean, it had been about 3, a 3-year-old and a baby, and I said, I can't raise my children in this atmosphere.
But then you went back.
They were just a very conservative group, and well, the new curriculum was a
It was a big
stickler
Big change.
in a
Big
lot of
change.
places. It wasn't just Creston,
No,
but
that's right.
it took quite a bit. But we were just straight out of college, and we've been learning how to how to teach with practical ways. And you know, our old way was you had a book to read, and you just stayed at that. And you did learn the 12 apostles, and you learned you were supposed to have all these things memorized as a kid. And I think, and that's not easy for me to do, and I thought of that often. There's just been a big change. This is what Paul talks about, changing and things. And so it was. We were the only ones who felt the need to lead. The rest, others, we had friends of our own age group. They stayed, and it didn't bother them so much. I think probably we got because he was education director and things that that probably was a bit of a mistake.
And what year was that?
Would have been about 1970. Larkin
I
was
was
born
going
in
to say that
68.
right when there's so much unrest.
Huh?
So much unrest about all kinds
There
of
was.
things, yeah.
There was. And that's, you know.
Yeah, it was a mess.
That was when in India,
Right.
when
Priest, yeah. Baptizing.
yeah, and
Let me tell you a happier story in Creston before we got run out of town. Larkin was about 3, and Brother Chandler from Sheraton came over to speak one day. And Nancy had Larkin towards the back of the congregation and told him he had to be quiet. And Brother Chandler, in his sermon, raised his voice quite strongly. Larkin stood up in the pew and said, "How come he can holler, Mom?" And the neat part was, he just told it stop. Brother Chandler just killed him in his steps. He lost his train of thought.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So how long were you not in Creston?
14 years.
You didn't go to church for 14 years?
No.
They went to Mount Ed.
And that was a good experience. It was good for me personally. Gertrude Baby, if you knew her, she was a wonderful teacher, and her son Jack was the most loving kind of guy, and he called me to be an elder, and I really enjoyed that.
Pat, do you have a question?
I had a little story I wanted to say about Ray. I was in, several years ago, I was desperately shopping in Snyder's of Humiston for a birthday present for my dear husband Jim. And I looked around, and there was the smiling, gentle faces of the Powells. And I told them my dilemma. And Ray pointed me out to this model John Deere car, tractor, and his great-great-grandfather or something drove this. And I bought that, and it was the best gift I ever gave my husband. It has family significance, and Daniel Silver, our grandson, still plays with it. Unfortunately, there has been some breakage of it with the tires and all, but that's just the way you have gotten into our lives. And it's always this presence of, a bit of a kindly, wise, humorous grin. And I'm so grateful to have been part of your life in a little way.
Let me piggyback a compliment.
Oh.
It was very important. When Nancy got GBS and was coming on, we didn't know what the heck she had. And our regular doctor in Corning was on vacation, first vacation. She and her husband had an awful time. And I feel sorry for the young man that was there. He was totally rattled because Nancy had this horrible pain in her chest. So if he got that, she must have a heart problem. So he gave her a nitroglycerin pill and nothing. And he went back another time and he said, "You must have bone cancer." And he sent us home that night with 2 big pills. He called them big pain pills. He said that therefore, if you have extreme trauma, like your leg is cut off in an auto accident, these are the pills that they give you. But if you don't have a trauma and take the pills, they'll kill you. Sent us home with poor Nancy couldn't get any relief, and she'd take a shower about every 2 or 3 hours. And the next morning, about 5 o'clock, she and I sat on the edge of the bed looking at these 2 pills. And well, do we take them or do we not take them? We took them. Didn't do a thing. Didn't kill us and didn't help her any. About that time, our daughter-in-law called. We were talking to her, and she said, "Why don't you call Dr. Magley? She's very good at referring it to the right people." So I went to the phone and I called Dr. Magley. And I was begging her to let me bring Nancy down to Leon to the hospital to try to give her some relief from this pain. she said, in her wisdom, you're wasting your time doing that. You need to go to a big hospital that has a research center, and they'll help you figure it out. And she said, what you need to do is what you aren't supposed to do. You just need to drive there to the emergency room and keep forcing your way in. So we got in the car, and that's what we did that night. And I'm not even sure how the car got to Des Moines, because we were really tired and wore out. But somehow it did. The lady doctor there that gave Nancy narcotic pain medicine has helped her for the first time. But when after she reviewed everything, she said, I'm sorry, I can't keep you. You're not a heart attack patient. You're not an auto accident patient. I just can't keep you. I kept begging her to somehow keep it. And my plan I had in my mind, if she dismisses and goes out, I'm going to drive around the block and go back in again. but luckily she finally got permission from an internal medicine doctor to admit Nancy. The interesting thing happened was the next day he inspected her GI tract. Sure, there was a problem there. Couldn't find one. But his young intern girl was from India, a very kind little girl, and she inspected Nancy and found one eyebrow wasn't working right. And that got us to a neurologist and got the game started in the right direction. And that's how we got to going. But it was your advice to go.
Which I don't give to everybody.
No. No. But we really appreciate that advice. Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment about Larkin, and you must be very proud. But Larkin, I remember the very first vote on women in the priesthood here in this congregation, which was very volatile. Barbara Higdon was one of them. Velma Roosh, I think, was one of them. Larkin Powell was one of them. and you know, and he got up and he spoke. He was a young person that was called, and he spoke. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was, you know, it was charming to have him amongst these giants.
Well, what he said was, I hope you're not voting for me just because I'm a man.
Yes. It was.
He did something. This isn't bragging, but I'm just amazed. He's the director of the School of Natural Resources at Lincoln in Nebraska. But with this past week, with the election, he has had a lot of students of various genders, not just male and female, but that's accepted. The teachers anymore, but he said he said that he was reading so many Facebook posts of how fearful these students are, and he said I spent most of my day trying to bring some peace and some calmness and letting them know that they will outlive this situation, but and he said there are women students are scared to death, and I was proud that he took it. We visited in person the other night, and he said I just told him that I was so pleased that he was running ministry in that way, and he said, well, I didn't have to, but he felt like that it would mean something to them to have the director of the school showing that compassion and interest in how they were feeling about this whole situation. And I thought it was pretty cool that he was doing that. That's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.